welcome to Crawlspace. I'm Tim, here today alone again in the Crawlspace studios in Wormtown. Lance is still on assignment despite what our friends Chris Duet and Dr. Shiloh of LA Not So Confidential say on Twitter. Lance is safe. He's unharmed. He is on another project right now, and you will be hearing from him again very soon. This episode was recorded on Monday, July 29th, with James Baysinger, host of the podcast Hide and Seek. And you, the listener, being a fan of true crime, you may have heard of this show. Well, I am here to tell you to give it a listen. It's a very interesting case, really well done by this fellow James Baysinger, who we met very briefly at CrimeCon 2019. We have some overlap with some mutual friends, including Art Roderick, former U.S. Marshal, who was on the Disappearance of Maura TV show with us on Oxygen. His podcast is an investigation of the disappearance of Washington State mother Nancy Moyer. Nancy was last seen in Tenino, Washington on March 6, 2009. She left work at 5:15, drove a coworker home, and went to the store at 6:45. She has not been seen since. All of her belongings, including her car, were found at her home, and foul play is suspected. Nancy has tattoos of an armband with stars, hearts, and flowers on her upper right arm, a butterfly on her back, double mint and juicy fruit with flowers and hearts on her upper back, a hibiscus flower on her left hip, a Playboy bunny on her right hip, and cherries with the initials AS on her right foot. Her ears and navel are pierced. She has dark brown hair and brown eyes. She is 4'11" to 5 feet and 105 to 120 pounds. Anyone with information should call the Thurston County Sheriff's Office at 360-786-5500. And that's just what someone did just a few weeks ago. His name is Eric Roberts, and he confessed to killing Nancy Moyer. He was arrested and later recanted his confession. So we catch James at a great time in this story because we don't really know what's going to happen. And there are multiple, I don't know if I want to say suspects or persons of interest, but certainly suspicious characters that linger around this case, and Eric is just one of them. So check out his show, Hide and Seek, and I really hope you enjoy this interview with James Baysinger. Here I am today with James Baysinger of the podcast Hide and Seek. James, how are you?
I'm doing phenomenal. Doing good, thanks, Sam. How about yourself?
I'm doing well, and I just finished binging your podcast, which I feel like is every podcast listener's dream, to binge straight through a podcast and then actually get to speak to the creator immediately after you're done.
Yeah, I've been on that same side where, I know the feeling.
Yeah, it wasn't hide and seek for me this weekend. It was hide and binge. Trying out my stand-up. Okay, so tell us, what is Sasquatch Productions?
Well, it's just the business I opened up in Sasquatch Productions. I mean, just the naming behind it, being up here in the Pacific Northwest. Sasquatch, or also known as Bigfoot, is also got the title of the Hide and Seek Champion. Kind of thought played well with the podcast name. So Sasquatch Productions is just the company that I own, and when I started this, and so that's where the naming comes from.
Okay, so this was your company that you started for this podcast?
Yes.
And is there anyone else a part of this company with you?
No, this is, I'm solely independent on this, and it's all me.
Incredible. Really well done. If anyone listening has not heard Hide and Seek, you might want to pause this interview and go binge it and then come back to this, because we're going to get into it. What did you do before you decided to do this?
Well, I'm still an insurance agent. I have an office up here in Washington State, and I've been in insurance for 8 years, and opened up my own office. I've been an agent for 6 years. And so I decided to do insurance, and the business allows me to take some time away. And I thought, this was something I wanted to try. I've listened to a lot of podcasts, including Missing Maura, and I, like a lot of other podcasts or podcast listeners, I listen to Up and Vanish, Serial, and I just thought, take a leap of faith, take a shot at it. This is something that you really do enjoy. And so I tried it. Now I still have my insurance office, and I'll go back to being a full-time insurance agent one day here soon. And then we'll pick up the pieces from there if we want to, or if I want to try a second season.
Now, what made you think you could do it too?
I don't know. That's a great question. I honestly don't know. I don't have any kind of investigative background. I don't have any kind of background that trains me for this kind of stuff. And I don't know if that was the same way for you, but I listened to a lot of podcasts, and I listened to and watched a lot of true crime TV back in the day, unsolved mysteries, ID, 48 hours, everything. And my family we just enjoy this kind of stuff. It's something that we've always grown up with. And I thought, take a shot at it. And who knows, if this flops, at least you can say you tried it. I'm okay with failure. It's what I don't want to do is look back and think, man, you should have tried that, or you should have done it. Because you look at guys like, Payne Lindsay with the serial, or the Payne Lindsay with Tara Grinstead's case. And here's a guy who's trying to produce something, not make a podcast, but it evolved into something that generated enough attention, like the serial case with Adnan, that if you bring enough attention to something, you could shake the tree enough for the leaves fall, and you might come up with something. So I thought, take a shot.
Yeah, so you went into it knowing that and believing you could have some effect or some impact on the case. I think that is totally different from the way me and Lance entered Maura Murray's case. We definitely didn't imagine that ever happening, and when it did, we kind of adjusted on the fly. Is there anything about your insurance job that helps you with this? Like skills you've learned or anything, or contacts?
Yeah, I think that just through the years of working with all sorts of individuals, from the kid who comes out of, high school, moves into his own apartment, and needs to get auto insurance, and it's the first time he's ever needing to learn what's renter's insurance. And then you got the middle age, having kids, and you have the people who are retiring. So I communicate with all sorts of individuals on a regular basis. And so I think that's helped me understand on how to relate to people, and almost, you want to kind of be a chameleon. You want to, meet them with where they're at. So I think that the people skills of just the day-to-day operations in my insurance agency has helped me being able to talk to, the guy who's considered a person of interest, the family, and as far as the business side of it goes, it's a totally different type of operation. But I would say just the management skills from my insurance offices also help. I know that looking back now, there's a lot of things I'd probably do differently if I did this again, but lessons learned.
Were you contacted by TV companies and everything during the run of this before the arrest of Eric Roberts?
Yeah, well, funny you ask, because when we went to CrimeCon, which is where we met, we had decided, or Kevin Balfe from CrimeCon, who puts it on, he had decided that he wanted to do the first crowd-solve event in Seattle. And it was almost like kind of perfect timing, God's timing, with me starting this podcast, reaching out to Kevin, wanting to open up a booth there. And he says, well, why don't you pitch me, what the story is? Because we're looking at doing an event out there in Seattle, and I need a story for the Pacific Northwest. And so it was like perfect timing. And so then once he said, okay, we have, Thurston County support, we have the family support, we have your support, we'll go ahead and go forward with this. And Kevin has a great relationship with Oxygen TV.
Yep.
And so the day that I get the call that this gentleman who's possibly responsible for Nancy Moyer's murder, this guy calls me and says, hey, we would like to do a short, 15-minute video to pitch to Oxygen. And I'm like on my way, because I just found out this guy got arrested. I'm like, sounds great. Can't talk. Call me tomorrow. And so he calls me the next day, and he's like, wow, didn't realize what's going on. That's awesome if this is what's really happening. And so now we're in talks, with possibly maybe a miniseries, a 4-episode miniseries. And then I've also talked to Dateline. Yeah, I mean, imagine you gotta let the dust settle sometimes when it comes to people, want to shoot or produce something. But kind of they want to see the ending of this too.
I'm kind of amazed that you went into this with no production background or anything like that either, huh?
Yeah, no, no, I hate talking in front of crowds. Yeah, I don't have any production background. I guess listening to, you know, your podcast or all the other ones prior to, you kind of know the sound and the feel and the vibe that you want, and you just kind of play with it.
Yeah.
I have had some help early on in the beginning from a friend of mine, but if I think from about episode 5 and beyond, he hasn't been able to be around. He had to move away. So, but no, it's been kind of a one man show. This in most of the season.
Okay. And your logo, I have to ask about it. It's beautiful. One of my favorite podcast logos I think I've seen. How did that? Did you make that, or did you tell someone and a graphic design artist put it together?
Yeah, I did not make it. It's a good friend of mine. He's a friend of mine who works for our church as a graphic artist, and he helps them there, and he also does some side stuff. And reached out to him. He's very talented. His name is Jordan Robinson. I said, hey, here's the theme, here's the feel, here's what I'm looking for. And it was the first image he showed us. I was like, that's awesome, love it. Lots of people were like, man, I didn't actually even see the face in the background. And so he's very creative.
It did take me a little bit of looking at the detail to see her face there, or a face there. But either way, I think it's beautiful. Even if you don't see that, I think it's great. So then your insurance job, what kind of insurance do you sell?
Yeah, I sell everything from property casualty, life, commercial, farm.
So is that like, because your style of interview when you're interviewing people is really fun to listen to, and it's I don't want to say like aggressive or pushy, but kind of like I guess I can't. It's like a gentle aggressiveness, like it's almost like I could see your sales background potentially have it. When you said it, I could see that coming into play. Do you think where you get that, or it's just...
Yeah. Once you've been told, no, I'm not interested enough times, you really kind of figure yourself out and what's the best approach for yourself. That's definitely, you got to know when to ask for the business, and then knowing, when not to ask. And so it's like going into it saying, am I okay to record now, or am I not okay? You have to build the relationships first.
Yeah, well, I would say that you're very good at that, and it's interesting and entertaining to listen and kind of be on the journey with you, because as a listener where you're trying to get, and then you'll ask, would you do this, or come on, like give me more than that. That aggressiveness, I think, is valuable for this.
Yeah, so, I appreciate it.
Well done. Okay, so let's get into the story of Nancy Moyer. Can you tell us a little bit about her and the details of her disappearance?
Nancy was a loving mother. She went to college. She worked for the Department of Ecology, had a job for 12 years. In 2007, her and her husband did split apart. They separated, and they had a very cordial co-parenting relationship. Nancy would have her girls from Sunday evening till Thursday after school. They would go to the dad's from Thursday after school till Sunday evening. And Nancy was, at that time of her life, she was single, out of college. When she married Bill, this was almost in a way kind of like her first for everything. And so when her and Bill separated, she had a chance to kind of, get out there and have fun and go around and hang out with her friends, go to bars, go to live music, bands that were playing. And so it was March 6, 2009, and Nancy, was riding home with a fellow colleague that she would normally carpool with. She was driving, and her plans for the weekend was to just relax. And she had a long week at work, and the girls are at dad's, so she goes to a store, buy some food, and then a couple bottles of wine and some cigarettes, and heads back home. She's just gonna chill out. And the neighbor of that Friday night on March 6th claims to have overheard a female voice around 11:15 saying, "Hurry up, get in the car." And here's 2 car doors shut. And the odd thing about that whole situation is when they heard the two-car door shut, they heard the vehicle drive away. Now, right before that, though, around 9 o'clock, 9:30, a police officer was running patrol, running radar outside of her house, and he sees her enter her house by herself, and he sees the grocery bags in the store that she just came from. But that was technically the last time she was ever seen by the police officer, and that was the last time we think that we ever heard Nancy's voice when the neighbor overheard this around 11:15. Now, it's, our strong belief that Nancy, that's the time that she left and never came back. Once 11:15, around that time, the heating turned on, but it never turned off for the rest of the weekend. When a certain individual who was a coworker of Nancy's was supposed to go on a date with her on Saturday, he stopped by the house because she wasn't answering the phone or confirming their date, and he stops by and the door was open, and he walks inside, calls out for her, looks for her, she's not there, leaves, but chooses to leave the door open still. And it's not until Sunday evening when Bill Moyer, her separated husband at the time, comes back and sees that the door is open. That's been the mystery ever since. We've never been able to find her, and obviously we've had some recent breaks in the case. That's how she went missing.
And the scene of her disappearance, so the door was open, the heat was automatically activated because the door was open?
Yeah. Just recognize the temperature and of the desirable, the desired set inside, and so it kicks on. The scene is Nancy would always sit in a chair on her porch when she would smoke a cigarette. And this chair is still there. It has her pack of cigarettes, though, in the cup holder in the chair, or that's on the chair. And one of the things I've asked, I don't smoke cigarettes personally, but I've asked individuals, would you ever leave your pack of cigarettes outside? If you did, what would happen to them? And everything I've ever heard is, well, it would ruin them. The moist, with it being cold. So that was one of the initial odd evidence that we saw. And then when you walk inside her house, her lights are on, her TV's on. She had a glass of wine with red wine in it on the coffee table. I've recently found out that there was a second glass, which I've always believed it to be a wine glass, but it was a second glass mug that was on the coffee table. Her purse, her keys are, where they always are. There's some more red wine glass or some wine glasses. Two or more are in the kitchen. One more is next to her bedside.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, the glasses that was a little confusing, like in trying to figure out if this meant anything or not. And I will say that if I ever drink red wine, which I do occasionally here at my house, I drink it out of like a pint glass.
Yeah.
I don't use the wine. And it's not for any other reason than I'm clumsy and I'm definitely going to spill if I'm using a wine glass.
Yeah. Yeah.
But my girlfriend uses a wine glass, so I don't know. I don't know if that says anything. Obviously, you can't put your own life into this, but you can kind of use it a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think naturally what we do is we insert ourselves and say, what would I do, or how would I have handled that? And that's really kind of what you're looking for when I started this, was I wanted people to kind of give an opinion, because what they dealt with or what they experienced in their life doesn't, maybe it's this one thing that they see that I'm not, or detectives are. And that's what we need, is just that one listener who could possibly say something that might turn us in a direction we've never looked. So it's like you said, you don't use an actual wine glass flute type because it's your preference. And, for Nancy, if she chose to have that one glass mug for somebody else to have a drink with her, or that was their preference, and let's say you went over there and you're like, yeah, I'll have a glass of wine. I'll just take the glass mug though. Mm-hmm. That could have easily been what happened.
Yeah.
But it was, to the new detective, it was kind of interesting because he was telling me, he's like, when I looked at it, there was change on the table, and it kind of looked like maybe almost like this glass mug was like a change jar for her.
Interesting. Okay. And so no sign of struggle at the scene as well?
No signs of a struggle, no forced entry, no blood. It almost looks like she just walked out the front door, and then the door didn't shut all the way, and left.
Yeah, and left her wallet there too, right?
Yeah, left wallet, identification, keys, didn't lock the door, didn't take her car. So, I mean, it was just, very bizarre situation overall, which kind of, if you take that information there and you think that she's on her chair, smoking a cigarette outside, what girl will naturally leave the house without her purse? It's very uncommon. Now, it doesn't say that doesn't mean that it's never happened in the history of mankind. I mean, it happens, but for her to leave the house with the lights on, TV on, door open, cigarettes in the cup holder outside, it was almost like my friend Dr. Maurice Godwin said there was some sort of ruse that lured her away from the front porch to get in the car. Maybe it was for a short trip, short ride, short drive. I'm not, maybe a conversation in the car and
Yeah.
they took off. I mean, it's just speculation, but it could have easily been one of all those examples.
Right. Yeah, and just because there's no sign of a struggle doesn't really mean there wasn't a struggle.
Right.
Even if, she was approached by someone she was familiar with, as in what Dr. Maurice Godwin said. I call him Doc Mogod, by the way. But I would imagine her to have at least gathered her keys, wallet, and cigarettes. If sounds like she was a heavy smoker. So that part is a bit confusing to me, because it definitely does sound like, oh, maybe this is someone she knew, who she trusted and went with, or at least knew a little bit. And he could be right. Maybe there's some kind of ruse. He's saying, oh, your daughter's in trouble or something like that. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
She leaves quickly, but it's still confusing when you look at the door being left open and everything. It seems like, to me, she left without wanting to. Now, the neighbor who overheard the voice, how sure is he that was a woman's voice?
He was pretty sure. I mean, he thought it was Nancy, and he said to me, I thought maybe like she was taking her daughters to the hospital. Well, we know that that's not the case, because her daughters were with their dads.
Right.
But he was pretty sure, I mean, that it was a female. And I've driven out to Nancy's house. I've been on the property. I know the distance between where this guy's bedroom's at, where he claimed to have heard where Nancy was at, and where the driveway's at, and where the direction the windows are facing. And sometimes I wonder maybe if it was wishful thinking, that after the fact you kind of look back and like, yeah, I thought I heard that, I thought I heard this. And but he could be 100% accurate with what he heard. And I have a hard time hearing sometimes. I listened to a lot of loud music growing up, and so I found it hard to believe that he can actually hear that, but it doesn't mean that he did.
Yeah, very interesting, because he thought it was Nancy speaking with her kids, and then he said he heard two doors close, or he thinks he heard two car doors shut. That scenario is confusing to me when we know that Nancy's car is still there, but I guess that means we're to assume wherever Nancy went, it was in a car that was parked like right behind her car in her driveway. Is that a layout that could be accurate?
I wouldn't say. I mean, if they made like some sort of like, if she was vertical and the vehicle that pulled right behind her was horizontal, there's no way of her backing out. Sure. She had a big enough driveway where you can park easily 5 cars without having to get behind one of them.
Okay.
So it was, I mean, out in the country, and so she had enough parking spaces that whoever parked there, I don't think that they parked right behind her unless they knew what they were doing and they didn't want her to get in her own car, and they set the scene up for her to get in their car right away. Like you had said, hey, your kids are in trouble. That would be a reason for her just to bolt from the deck and go to the car with them. This is somebody that she knew and trusted.
Right. Yeah. But you've completely, her family members are completely ruled out, and you've spoken to them. They seem like great people.
Yeah, no, they are. They're great people. I've developed a real relationship with these people, and obviously, when your ex-wife or your separated wife it goes missing, you're, as the husband, always going to be the first person they look at.
Yeah. And
so with Bill, I knew that the first Detective Haller, had ruled him out, and he had took a polygraph very early on. I knew the second detective had ruled him out as well. As I was going through this investigation, there was some new information that was coming forward, though, and that was Bill had said at the time that Nancy went missing that she didn't have a cell phone. And so did so did her family, her sister, her in-laws. No one said that she had a cell phone. But once the daughter came forward and we were talking, she said, no, my mom definitely had a cell phone. that was kind of new information to me. So when there was a IDTV episode on this case as well that I watched, and when I first watched that, when he said that there was a cell phone, I went back to the detective and said, I thought you said there was never a cell phone. And he said, no, he just misspoke. That's not accurate. So when the daughter told me what she, remembers the phone being at her mom's house and playing with it, that was new. So I went back to Bill, and his response was, no, Thurston County should definitely have the cell phone. They don't have it, Bill. And he's like, that's not right. And so eventually I was working with a private investigator, and he shared the actual transcript of what Bill said when she first went missing. And he said that she didn't have a cell phone. So then it got kind of awkward between Bill and I, because this is the worst news that you could possibly ever imagine, is your ex-husband or your dad is responsible. And so I've ruled him out in my opinion, especially when a guy comes forward and says I'm responsible, and then he recanted, of course. But I've pressed Bill enough, and I've really looked at all the possibilities. Even given when he's considered a suspect or a person of interest in my eyes, he's never backed off once with answering the difficult questions. And has it been uncomfortable at times? Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you remember, but I did that like kind of test where I asked two different couples of something that they went through that was extreme for them emotionally. Everything's not accurate with them either. So this is something that happened 10 years ago. Naturally, people say, well, how could he ever forget that?
Yeah. No, you absolutely proved, I think, that people going through traumatic experiences aren't going to remember things accurately, potentially, or certainly not going to remember everything.
Yeah.
I think that's important. I like Bill's tonal shift when calling you James. Okay, James. But he understood, and it was a relationship building question, I think. But yeah, it was his tone. He answered everything, but his tone changed a little bit when he called you James.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now you've spoken to a lot of people in this case. Who else have you spoken to? Law enforcement.
Yeah, I've law enforcement. I've spoke with the brother-in-law, sister-in-law. I've spoke with her mom. I've spoken with people who never do not want to be on the podcast, have no interest in being on the podcast, but need me to know information. Coworkers, ex-girlfriends of persons of interest in case there was any kind of retaliation there.
Yep.
And I've gotten the harsh, do not call me back, don't want to talk to you. And I've also spoken with Bernard Howell. He's a guy who, murdered a gal in Tenino a year after Nancy went missing.
Yeah. Pretty good suspect. And he had also delivered meat to Nancy's place. Is that accurate?
Yeah. It's funny because we were just talking yesterday, and I'm bringing up again the meat packaging, and he's like, they're lying. Thurston County's lying. I didn't sell meat in Tenino. And I'm like, but Bernard, you know how many people have called me and said that they remember you selling meat to them and them turning you away. And he just kind of remains quiet. He's like, I don't know what to say. Like, I didn't sell meat in Tenino. And I said, well, when Sam points you out in a lineup of men, because Sam, the daughter, yep, Bernard had murdered Vonda, they thought maybe that he was responsible for Nancy. So when they asked Sam, Nancy's daughter, if she recognized any of the men in the lineup, she pointed right at Bernard. She said, I've seen him before. And so he thought she was lying. And I was like, why would she lie about that? And his response is I think that Thurston County, swayed her into picking me in the lineup.
Oh boy.
I don't know how. I mean, you know that you've seen shows at times, and I'm not claiming Thurston County did this at all, but you've seen the shows at times where someone is, lured into picking this picture because of the way that they lay it out. They're pointing the finger at the picture, and you've heard that and I've seen that kind of stuff before.
Yeah.
But sorry, I don't think Sam's gonna lie about it, and I know that they didn't have, local TV or news because Bill was financially struggling at that time, having to carry the kids on full time now. So he turned off the cable. So it wasn't like they've seen this guy in the news for this murder either. So this was the first time that Sam was shown this picture, but she remembered walking up and seeing Bernard selling meat to Nancy.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting because in every case that we've looked into, there is a staggering amount of suspicious people. So I guess my question is, how many people could you create a somewhat realistic case for them being guilty?
Yeah, I totally know what you mean because that was one of the things where, and I don't know if you guys experience this or not, but when people would ask me, "Who do you think did it?" I would always have to refrain from actually even not giving an answer, but just even allowing my mind to go there because I had to try to keep my mind so open so I didn't miss anything that possibly was a clue that I was more focused on. I think this guy did it, and I was actually there was one individual I got pretty zoned in on for about a week and a half, and I had to take a step back and realize, okay, you're losing focus. If I were to
Yeah.
create hypothetical speculation type of theory here, I could probably give you, let me count, six.
Wow. Yeah. Yep. That's about where I'm at too with like the Maura case. It's incredible, and you're doing a great job of not doing that. So I want to commend you on not like following those pathways down too far, or at least only kind of peeking down the rabbit hole and then kind of stepping back out. Because there's that many possibilities that you could just blast out there if you wanted to. I
Yeah.
mean, it would be really irresponsible, but it wouldn't be the first time someone did it in a podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. And you hit right on the nail with that. I didn't want to do that just because I just, like you said, it's pretty irresponsible. If you don't have the facts, you don't know, don't put someone in this light where you're accusing them now of murder, and
Yeah.
yeah, I'm completely in agreement with you, and I appreciate that.
And here's the biggest reason, because if you did that, if you had done that, obviously not all of them are guilty. Maybe one of them is, but as it turns out, there was someone named Eric Roberts who placed a call and admitted to killing Nancy just a few weeks ago in real time as we sit here at the end of July 2019 recording this interview. And he wouldn't have been one of the people that you could have done that or actually, no, I take that back. He probably would have been, but as a podcast listener, he wouldn't have been. Does that make sense? Because I think you knew of him and were aware of him as a potential suspect, but you hadn't really talked much about him on the podcast.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's something since, before going into Eric, that was something that I've kind of done with the people who have been willing to talk to me is call them back and say, hey, man, like, obviously you've heard recent news. I
Yeah.
just wanted to say thank you. And I'm sorry if this brought any negative pressure or attention your way. I try to be very clear at the end of my conversations with Aaron Huntley or Aaron Johns, Jim Roth, Bernard Howell is okay. Like, this is where I stand with him, but I got to move on to the next suspect. So now where we're going with Eric is, yeah, I mean, I've known about Eric since, like I said, the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't, during my own research on the web, I was looking up as much as I could with Nancy's case, and then eventually I got in contact with the detective, and his name was discussed, and it was a person of interest that we were talking about. There's more that detectives have asked me not to share until after the case is over. But I also knew if I put Eric on my podcast, and this was something that we hadn't, that Eric wasn't aware that he was a person of interest yet.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to be irresponsible because I have a podcast now that I'm going to go put this birdie in his ear now that he could possibly be looked at. And if let's say he knew where the body was at and was going to move it because of my conversation with him, I didn't want to be irresponsible with the information that I had. So as much as I wanted to share and dive into it, I did want to make contact just to introduce myself and just to kind of see how he would respond, not even with like, hey, I got questions for you, but because I had also known about him through Aaron Huntley. That was his nephew that Nancy was having a relationship with. So he was kind of like my foot in the door. Hey, because Sharon, Nancy's sister, said that she would sneak out of her house to go over to Eric's house and meet with Aaron. So that was kind of my foot in the door of, hey, I want to talk to Eric.
And do you think that's true about Nancy sneaking out of her house and going to see Aaron at Eric's house? And I just want to be clear. Eric is the person who admitted to killing Nancy and then later took it back. But Aaron is his nephew, and Nancy was having the relationship with Aaron, and she would apparently walk a couple of doors down and visit Aaron.
Yeah, that's what she had told Sharon, her sister, when I had asked Aaron about this, and he denied it. He said that never happened. And I've asked him this, early on, since Eric's come out and confessed to this. Episode 11 will be a kind of a heated conversation between Aaron and I, because I'm confronting him again on all this stuff. Because I'm like, man, do you understand? Eric just has to say that Nancy was at his house because of you, and that would explain any kind of DNA. So now's your time to make it very clear. Did you ever meet with Nancy? He said, I've never met with Nancy. I'd never had sex with anybody at my uncle's house. I said, okay.
I mean, it seems like a weird situation, doesn't it? Like I've definitely never had a woman meet me at my uncle's house. Like it doesn't. I mean, obviously, I'm not that family, so you can't say. But that's bizarre to me.
Yeah, I mean it definitely is. I think it's bizarre for lots of reasons. I mean, why would you have to go to your uncle's house?
Yeah,
meet with a girl you want to see.
Just convenience, I guess. He just happens to stay over his uncle's house once in a while?
Well, they would throw parties at his uncle's house.
Okay.
Remember, and to kind of clear this up, is Eric also worked at the same place as Nancy and Aaron. So they knew each other. So if Aaron was helping put on a party at Eric's house where they would go barbecue, have drinks, listen to music, if Nancy's three houses down, and she knows a party's going on down the street or three houses down, when the kids and everybody goes to bed, maybe she sneaks out and would go party. But I've never had one person come forward from these parties and say, I remember Nancy there. Not one person said that. So there's a lot of gray area in this. Is you got Nancy telling Sharon, that she snuck over. Aaron saying never happened. Eric said it never happened. It's a possible realistic scenario just because he is three houses down, they're coworkers, and there's a party going on down the street.
Okay.
I don't know. It kind of, you want to say that Nancy's telling the truth. You want to say that this is the case. And then unfortunately she's not here to testify to that. But no one's coming forward and saying it. I don't know what to do at this point.
Yeah, that's definitely tough. There's some other kind of inconsistencies too with things that Nancy said and things that the Aarons said. And now, which Aaron is Eric Roberts' nephew?
Aaron Huntley.
Okay, so then the other Aaron, and forgive me, his last name?
Johns.
Okay, so that Aaron Johns, Nancy said that she had sexual relations with him as well, and he's denied that to you. Is that accurate?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so and she may have even gotten a tattoo to symbolize those two Aarons. Have you found other things that Nancy has said that can't be corroborated, or things that seem a little bizarre like that?
Yeah, when someone goes missing, or a girl, you look at her journal if she has one, right? And the journal will tell you all what she's feeling. And some of the stuff that I've received on Nancy's journal entries, you don't know if this is a girl and she was hurting, but if she's expressing things in a way but that aren't accurate.
Yeah.
She talks about drugs, and no one ever knew of her to take drugs. Aaron Huntley told me that they smoked weed a couple of times, but she wasn't the person that was, saying, hey, let's smoke. It was Aaron. When Nancy says, in her journal entry, junkie drugs all the time, no one knows of her taking junkie drugs. No one knows of her taking meth. She didn't behave and have, she was always at work. She was responsible, always on time. Her financial records doesn't reflect that. But I mean, she liked to go out and party, but she wasn't a junkie drugs. And then she kind of talks about, why do I need to be, I believe she says, a slut and a prostitute or something like that. And it's like, but that's not true. And Tenino is a population of 1,700. I mean, I don't know how much of that's going on in that town. I don't think that it was. So I think it's just a girl who's speaking from, I never, my husband was my first for everything, to now she's kind of stepping out a little bit. And so the number of, multiple people that who she possibly was having sex with could be very small, but to her, very large.
Mm-hmm.
And she's
That's true. Yep.
smoking weed and she's never done this stuff before. Now she's smoking cigarettes. That could be junkie drugs to a girl who's never done this kind of stuff before.
Oh, she hadn't even smoked cigarettes before?
No, she started smoking cigarettes afterwards.
Yeah, it seems like a bit of embellishment in her journals at the very least, if not sort of like creating her own fiction.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, which makes it way more difficult to know what's true or not because, as you said, that's her diary. That's where all her honest and open thoughts should be. But I think it sounds like she's embellished a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think she's entitled to do what she did. What choices she made, and never should someone go missing because she's wanting to enjoy herself. I think for people to realize though is you expose yourself a little bit more, and that's just the facts. But with Nancy, I think that she was hurting because she really, really, really liked Aaron Huntley. She really liked Aaron Huntley, and Aaron and I have talked about that, and he feels some guilt because of that.
Yeah.
He had her, she really cared for him, wanted a relationship, and he wanted to see her, but not in a serious relationship. And once he realized that she was really pressing the relationship side of it, he really backed off. And I think that's when Nancy kind of really started to get really sad because she'd left her family for this guy. And she was financially struggling. And so I think that she just kind of was very hurt and was going down south fast. But how she went missing, I don't know if those two really played a part together.
So Nancy and Bill had gotten separated. And so I guess you could say that's a change to Nancy's behavior because it was her who was really asking for that separation. Are there other changes to her behavior, or has mental illness ever been considered in Nancy's case?
I don't know if mental illness is I know that with the people that I've talked about, and I'm very sensitive with that kind of stuff because my position has always been if it's not relevant to the case, then I'm not going to share it. But I think that there were some things there that it's also been kind of referred to as Nancy world.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it was an illness. I just think that I don't know what you can call it because she was 36 years old when she went missing. She was 34, she was still happily married and nothing was ever discussed prior to her separation as having some sort of mental disability. So I think it was just the path that she was going down, that depression or anxiety. I think something took over and it was very strong and something she was having to deal with.
Yeah. Interesting. Let's talk a little bit more about Eric, who was recently arrested and then not charged with murder, released, rearrested, but was put in federal custody because of a gun charge. And then he was released again. Is that the order of things?
Yes, almost. So he was arrested for the second degree murder, and then court proceedings. The prosecutor didn't push forward with the second degree, but he was arrested for gun charges that they found at his house which were the federal gun charges. And then he was released on those as well because apparently one of the guns that they thought were illegal was a short barrel pistol versus a short barrel shotgun. And then so he was supposed to get out again. The day he's supposed to get out, he gets rearrested and still held for domestic violence charges that his son filed against him. And so that's a couple, I think it's Snohomish counties where he's being held out now. And that bail was at $600 initially, and then when he went before the judge, they increased it to $10,000. Now I've spoken with the family, and they said we're not bailing him out. That's where he's at now. He's still in jail.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, that's good at least.
Yeah. August 7th is a big date for us because then that's when he goes to court for this domestic violence incident.
Okay. Great. Looking forward to hearing what happens there.
Yeah.
So, thoughts on this guy? Does this sound realistic? Did Nancy apparently maybe had a relationship with this guy?
It's definitely realistic with his confession.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting at because so he called 911 from outside prison and then took it back when he got inside. So was he on something that just, gave him some paranoia or something when he made the call initially?
Yeah, so he originally called and obviously he confessed, and then when the next day he recanted his confession, I strongly believe that he was drunk and high when he called in. And so so to answer your question, I believe he was drunk and high.
Okay, so then logistically speaking, Eric lived a few doors down from Nancy's old residence. And now that she was living in Tenino, that was not, a few doors down from this Roberts guy.
Right.
So realistically, like he would have had to have known where she lived or would have had to have seen her at the store or just been driving by or something.
Yeah, I'm not, when it all started, we don't know that part yet, but you're absolutely right. She went from three doors down to towards, in the city of Tenino. Still, the drive is like 10 minutes.
Okay.
In where they lived was in Rochester, but it was like right on the edge of Tenino. So he, in his probable cause report that was shared, he even points out where her house is out, which road she's down, and how he was sleeping with her. And this was Aaron, his nephew's ex-girlfriend. And so he had to have known where she lived. And he even refers to her as a girl who went missing that lived down that road. So he said he went to her house and picked her up. That's what he says he did when he first confesses. So, and they went back to his house.
He picked her up at her house and they went back to his house.
Yep.
About 10 minutes away.
Yeah.
Okay, well then why is the TV left on and the door open?
That's a great question. That's what I'm looking for is why did she just like say, okay, let's just go? I mean, if she took her car there knowing, let's say they were going over to his house to hook up, why did they just hook up at her house?
Yeah.
If she just didn't want to and wanted, his car in the driveway, for example, and drives over and gets in his car to go over to his house, if she's getting in his car and it's, let's say 11:15 based upon what the neighbor says and claims, if you're getting in someone else's car, my mentality would think, okay, well, I'm going to shut the door because I don't have control of just coming back when I want to. If I drive my car over there, you would naturally still grab your keys. You would, shut the door, turn the lights off, because I don't know. That's a struggle for me. That's why I don't know if he's telling the whole truth, because in his first confession, he says, we were out near some river and she attacked me, and I don't know why, but she attacked me and I fought back and I killed her on accident. And then he says that you won't find her. She's in the hills. And then he asks detectives to turn off the recorder, in which they do. And then he changes his story. And then he says he went and picked her up, came back. They were having sex and, he had choked her and didn't try to kill her, but it went bad. And then he tells them she's right behind, he asked them, can we take a walk? Because every time they would ask him, what did you do with her? He would just weep and cry. And he said he was, it's hard for him to get there. It's hard for him to share. Then he says, let's go for a walk. And he points at the fire pit and says, if I don't want to incriminate myself any further, but if I were to bury a body out here, I would be right there. And he points at the fire pit. So he's changed his story twice. And why now is he coming forward? My only second thought, or my only other theory at this point, is if he listened to episode 9 of Hide and Seek, he knew that we're now starting to submit DNA evidence going forward because it's never been done. And so if the sexual encounter between the two actually happened at Nancy's house on her bed, and we have the bed sheets, which Detective Mickey Hamilton says we're going to submit those for evidence or DNA testing. If he felt the pressure or if he knew we were submitting the wine glasses, or we were submitting anything for DNA at Nancy's house, if that pressure just weighed on him, maybe that's it. I don't know. But like you said, it doesn't explain why she just got in his car and how the way the condition the house was left.
Yeah, I'm still very confused. And was Aaron still dating Nancy at the time she went missing?
No,
How long had they not been seeing each other?
about a year.
Okay, so I suppose in that year there's time for his uncle to move in. Again, kind of unprecedented. It doesn't sound like anything I've ever heard of, but doesn't mean it can't happen. One question I have is, do you think that justice could be a thing here? Is that even a possibility?
If Eric comes clean, yeah. It's justice as far as knowing the truth, being able to put to rest Nancy and properly do this for her daughters to move on. That grieving starts, but justice, they're never going to get Nancy back until Eric's willing to own up and confess if he's responsible. There is no justice. And I think that if he does, then we can have justice.
I know. I'm starting to think it's hardly even a thing, because if she's taken away, that there's never going to be justice for her family, and that's, you can. It's very sad to me to think of, because you could kidnap a kid or whatever, and that is, you'll never find justice if they did something to that kid because the kid's gone.
Right.
It's just it'll never be what it was. So that is injustice by the book, I think. Now, you have a family, right? You mentioned that in one of the episodes?
Yeah, I have recently married.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I have a 7-year-old boy, and that's my family. We're going to get some dogs here pretty soon that we'll add to it, and maybe some more little ones.
Nice. The dogs, are they for safety, or is this something you've been concerned about?
That's funny you ask. Yes. One, I got a very strong security system.
Yeah.
But two, I grew up with dogs, and dogs are a great home defense before someone actually breaks in.
Yeah.
My wife wants a golden retriever, and I want a cane corso.
And so we met at CrimeCon 2019 briefly, and I saw that you were talking to Art Roderick, who is an old friend of ours from the Disappearance of Maura TV show. We're good buddies with him, so just wanted to say shout out. And when I heard him on the podcast, I thought that was very cool. So how did you come to meet Art?
Through Kevin. And Kevin was the connection there. Once, Thurston County's been pretty helpful with me on this case as far as cooperation. I got a redacted case file, and CrimeCon, CrowdSolve, what they needed was the law enforcement to be on board with supporting the case and what they were trying to do, and family. Well, Kevin reached out to Arthur, and Arthur made some calls above Mickey Hamilton, and eventually got them on board and with providing the case file and supporting us in CrowdSolve. But Kevin said, okay, well, Arthur Roderick's, he looked over the case first before CrowdSolve was ever a thing. And he said, as long as Art's good with it, I'm good with it. Art liked the case. He thought there was some real opportunity to bring some more light to the case, and that's how I got connected.
Art, he has these strings throughout the country and the world, and he can just pull them whenever he wants.
Yeah,
I think he knows everyone, and everyone is super impressed by his law enforcement background. We've been with him when he's met police officers who are almost in awe of him, and he'll give them a U.S. Marshal pin.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I have a buddy back here who is Ranger Battalion, done lots of time overseas. He's great guy, but as soon as he started reading Arthur's background, he was like, oh wow, do you know what this means?
Yeah, he's a very impressive guy and super down to earth and just so nice.
Great guy.
I'm honored to call him a friend. Now, what the heck is going on with CrowdSolve now? Are you going to be able to do this event with CrimeCon in Seattle?
I don't know yet. We're going to do something still for Nancy's case, regardless from what Kevin said. But I felt horrible because Kevin's like, hey, I'm a little worried that this actually might get solved before crowd solve.
Yeah.
I was like, no, it's not gonna happen, man. Don't worry about it. Like I'm working the leads, but I don't think anything's gonna really come from this. And then a week later, sorry,
Just incredible.
sorry, not sorry. And Kevin gets it. He knows. He's just looking at this from the business, but big picture, he totally understands and's been totally supportive. Like this is a good thing. It's a good problem. Not for me necessarily, but it's a good problem for us to finally know what happened to this girl.
Sure.
They're looking at different cases in this area, and there are a couple cases that I shared with him that I considered when I first started this journey. And again, he's gonna be the point of contact on that if he feels like this is a good case to work with. And Thurston County already has a relationship with CrimeCon, so we're trying to find something that's going to fit with the family and then still with Thurston County. And yeah. So we'll see. I don't know what Kevin's plans are yet. I know right now it's kind of have to hurry up and wait, with knowing we don't know what's going to happen with DNA testing, how fast we're going to get that stuff back. If Eric's a guy, then crowd solves. There's no point in crowd solve. They need a case that is not solved. But then let's say Eric gets out and we all think it's him, but we go to crowd solve, but he's still the main suspect. It kind of takes away from what the purpose of crowd solve was supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure. I know, again, we'll be there, but I don't know if it'll be about our case.
Gotcha. And what does Nancy's family think of CrimeCon, or what did they think of visiting CrimeCon 2019?
Sam and Bill were very, they really didn't know what to expect, but they were very surprised seeing all the people there who are also victims of this, who have also lost relatives and lost family members. They greatly appreciated all the support and people who came by, and they've never seen or heard of something like this. I mean, Bill's never listened to a podcast. It was a positive experience for them. That was like it all was worth it for me, watching everybody come up to Sam and shake her hand and give her hugs. And but at the same time, they're like, man, it's really sad to see how many people here who have lost family like us, who don't have answers. They don't feel alone.
Yeah, it is sad, obviously, that that there are a lot of families that don't have the answers. But yeah, I've always been incredibly inspired by CrimeCon, just because you get approached by these families who are desperate for coverage,
Yeah.
And so you really feel like your value, I think, when you're there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was one of the things that stuck out to me when I was there, was the amount of people who came up in tears, and they're like, you doing this, even if it's not about our daughter or my mom, you doing this makes us feel like we are not forgotten. The community of the ones who have lost someone who don't have answers. It makes us feel like we're not forgotten. So that totally made you feel like, okay, you're doing this thing that you don't even realize the impact you're making, but it's a great thing.
Yeah. All right, James. Well, I don't want to take up any more of your time. I know you're busy, or you're talking to everyone on the phone, pressing them for answers and and stuff. So really well done. And I just wanted to ask you this final question. What has this experience meant for you?
Oh, man. Man, I've never been asked that question. It's unforgettable. It's been sweat and tears, no sleep. I think that I wanted to try this. I did it. I had no idea that this is where it could have led us or led the family. I guess my only message, or I guess the takeaway, is if you're someone who's listening to this, take a shot. I mean, it only takes one person. I mean, I've been a one-man crew for quite a while now, and many people have called me and said, hey, give me advice. I would be willing to take anybody's call to share my experience, but I took a leap of faith, and this is where it got me. So if you're somebody who's experienced this, or you listen to this kind of stuff, consider taking a shot, doing something in your own state, because they need more people like us who give a strong interest into this kind of stuff. There's a lot of people out there who don't have answers, and I've questioned if I could even go any further, but it was all worth it. I don't know if I'll ever do another season, but I'll cross that bridge when I get there, but it was all worth it.